Welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at the work of Dr. Ahmed Ejaz.
Oh, yeah, this one is fascinating.
Yeah, and we've got all sorts of different stuff on him. Profiles, brochures from his clinic, even excerpts from his website. I got to say, the more I read, the more I'm like, who is this guy?
I know. It's not every day you find a psychologist who's also a homeopath, a life coach, motivational speaker, and a social activist.
Seriously, it's like, how do all those even fit together?
Mm.
So today, I think our mission is to figure that out. Not just what his titles are, but how does he actually approach health and wellness? What do you think?
Well, maybe those titles are our first clue.
Okay, how so?
Well, to me, it suggests he's not just looking at treating, a specific symptom. It's about the whole person.
Yeah.
Mental, physical, even their goals in life, maybe.
So more of a holistic approach then.
Exactly. It's about empowering the individual, not just fixing a problem. What do you think?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of holistic, let's talk about his main clinic, Similia Homoeo Clinix. Now, the brochures paint this picture of a very modern setup, high-tech equipment, all that, but also they emphasize this really peaceful, tranquil atmosphere.
Kind of an interesting contrast, right? High-tech but serene makes you wonder what the experience is actually like for the patients.
Right. And they also specifically mention using liquid solutions and LM potencies, which honestly, I had to look that one up.
Oh, right. LM potencies. Yeah. That's basically a modern approach in homeopathy where they use these very diluted substances to kind of stimulate the body's own healing abilities.
Interesting. So sort of nudging the body in the right direction. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Like a gentle reminder rather than a forceful intervention.
Got it. Okay. So we have the clinic, but then there's also SHES, the Similia Health and Educational Society.
Right. And this is where I think that social activist side of Dr. Ejaz really shines.
Totally. They've got these free medical camps, community health initiatives, the kind of work that reaches people beyond just those who can afford his services.
Exactly. It's about improving the health of the entire community. Very impressive.
It is. And then alongside SHES, we have RIMS,
RIMS.
the Right Institute of Mind Sciences. And they offer workshops on everything NLP, hypnosis, the Silva method. And then there's this one called Fourth Dimension Education, which apparently involves firewalking and spoon bending.
Whoa, hold on. Firewalking, spoon bending. What's going on here? Is this still about health?
I know, right? It's like we took a sudden turn into the more unconventional.
Help me out here. Is this about the mind's power over matter or what?
Maybe, but it's definitely piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
Where does this fit into the picture?
Let's try and ground ourselves a bit for now, okay?
Okay, sure.
So one thing that comes up again and again in all of these materials is Dr. Ejaz's emphasis on homeopathy.
Okay, yeah.
He really seems to believe it's gentle, safe, and cost-effective. And he keeps talking about addressing the root cause of illness, not just, masking symptoms.
Which makes sense, given that whole holistic approach we were talking about.
Exactly. It's about understanding the why behind the problem.
Right. But then he also mentions homeopathy working on a genetic level. And that's where I'm like, wait, hold up. Is there any scientific basis for that?
Yeah, that's where things get a bit tricky. Homeopathy has its proponents, and there's anecdotal evidence, sure. But, the scientific community, by and large, is still pretty skeptical, especially about claims like influencing genes.
Okay, fair enough. So we've got this homeopathy foundation. But then there's another layer here. Dr. Ejaz also has an MBA.
Oh, you're right. I almost forgot about that. And he offers corporate services, too, like marketing, HR, business strategy. It's not your typical combination.
Not at all. So do you think maybe his business skills are part of what allow him to run these successful clinics and these social initiatives?
That's a good question. Is it all connected somehow?
Yeah. And then we can't forget about his work on interfaith harmony, too. Where does that fit in?
So many pieces to this puzzle, right?
Seriously, it's like he's constantly bridging these seemingly separate worlds.
Right. It almost makes you wonder, does this theme of connection run through all of his work?
That's an interesting thought.
Maybe it's a core part of his philosophy.
Maybe it is. And speaking of reaching beyond boundaries, he's also traveled all over the place. Germany, Austria, France, India, Russia, the U.S., the list goes on and on.
He's like a global knowledge sponge, learning from all these different practitioners, different cultures, different approaches to health.
Right. I mean, it shows a real openness to diverse perspectives. And he's got this online homeopathy course, Homeopathy for Home. I wonder if that's part of his effort to make this knowledge more accessible, maybe reach a wider audience.
Yeah, maybe even beyond Pakistan. After all, he really emphasizes empowering people to take control of their own health, right? Maybe this online course is part of that.
Could be. But,
Yeah.
he's not doing all this alone. We need to talk about Dr. Nadia Ahmed, his wife.
Oh, yes, Dr. Nadia. She's an expert in homeopathy and in psychology herself.
Right. They've co-authored books together, give lectures together. It's like this real power couple situation.
And maybe their partnership is part of their success. I mean, think about it. With their combined expertise, they can offer this truly holistic and multifaceted approach.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've got this holistic approach, this focus on empowering patients, a global perspective, this fascinating partnership.
But there's one piece of the puzzle we haven't quite figured out yet, wouldn't you say?
You're talking about the firewalking,
Yeah.
the spoon bending, that fourth dimension education.
Exactly. I mean, on the one hand, it's easy to dismiss it all as just a bunch of, woo-woo stuff. But there's a part of me that's really intrigued.
I hear you. What if there's something to it, something we don't fully understand yet?
Right. That's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. We get to explore these questions, keep an open mind.
I'm game if you are.
Let's do it. I think things are about to get really interesting. So we were talking about Dr. Ejaz being open to those more unconventional things, like firewalking and spoon bending. It definitely pushes the boundaries of what we normally think of as health and wellness, right?
Totally. It's like he's trying to blend those ancient traditions with modern science and then sprinkle in some, like, mind over matter stuff just for fun. I don't know. I'm still processing it all, to be honest.
It's a lot, for sure. But I think it all comes back to this idea of empowering people to, tap into their full potential, not just physically, but mentally and, I don't know, maybe even spiritually, too.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Right.
Like if you can train your mind to walk on fire or bend a spoon with your thoughts, imagine what else you could do, right?
Exactly. It's about realizing we're capable of way more than we often think. And that ties in with what we were talking about earlier, that whole empowering patients to take charge of their own health thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's not about him fixing you. It's more about giving you the tools and the knowledge to understand your own body and make your own choices.
Right. It's like he's saying, I'm not going to heal you. You're going to heal yourself. I'm just here to help. And I think that online course, Homeopathy for Home, kind of reinforces that too. It's about giving people the knowledge they need to become their own healers, in a sense.
So he's more like a guide than a traditional doctor.
That's a good way to put it. Maybe it's a bit of both. He definitely seems to have this deep knowledge of traditional and alternative approaches, but I think he also really believes in the power of the individual to, participate in their own healing.
Yeah, and facing a health challenge, whether it's physical or mental, that can be really tough,
Absolutely. And that's where this blend of science and spirituality, psychology, it all seems to come together. It's about providing support on all those different levels so people can get through those challenges and come out stronger on the other side.
It makes you wonder, what's it actually like to be one of his patients? Do they feel empowered? Do they see real results?
I know, right? It would be amazing to hear directly from them, wouldn't it?
Totally. We can only speculate so much from these brochures and websites.
Yeah, to really understand the impact of his approach, we'd need to hear those personal stories.
That's true.
Yeah.
But speaking of broadening our perspective,
Yeah.
what about all his travels? I mean, the guy's been everywhere. Germany, Austria, France, India, Russia, the U.S. It's pretty impressive.
I know. He's like a global knowledge seeker.
Right. It seems like he's always searching for new information, new techniques, new ways of understanding health and healing.
And he's not just passively absorbing information either. It's like he's constantly evaluating, figuring out what resonates with him and creating his own unique approach.
Yeah, he's not afraid to, challenge conventional thinking and think outside the box. It's pretty refreshing, actually.
Definitely. But let's be real for a second. Some of this stuff, like the firewalking and spoon bending, it's pretty far out there. I get why some people might be skeptical.
Oh, totally. I mean, I have my moments of doubt, too,
It's healthy to be skeptical. We should always question extraordinary claims and look for evidence. But I also think it's important to, stay open to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's more to reality than we currently understand.
True. Think about all the scientific discoveries throughout history that were initially dismissed as crazy. What if we're just at the beginning of understanding what's possible?
Right. What if Dr. Ejaz is onto something that we're just starting to grasp? What if there really is this, untapped potential within us all?
Untapped potential. I like that. But, unlocking that potential, takes work, right?
For sure. It's not just about wishing and hoping. It takes dedication, a willingness to step outside your comfort zone, all that good stuff.
Which I think is where his background in psychology and motivational speaking probably comes in handy.
Yeah.
He's not just offering a treatment plan, it's like he's offering a framework for personal growth.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual growth either. Remember Ejaz, his work with the community health initiatives?
Oh, right, yeah.
It's like he understands that our individual well-being is connected to the well-being of everyone around us.
Yeah, that's a powerful message, especially in a world that can feel so, divided.
For sure.
Okay, so we've talked about his holistic approach, his empowering philosophy, his travels, the mind over matter stuff, his commitment to the community. What else is there? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room.
You mean, like, does any of this actually work?
Exactly. I mean, we've seen all these different approaches, the homeopathy, the psychology, the spiritual practices. But the big question is, does it actually lead to positive outcomes?
Yeah, that's the question we've been dancing around this whole time, haven't we?
We have, and I think it's a tough one to answer definitively.
Yeah, it's tricky because we're dealing with approaches that are hard to measure using, like, traditional scientific methods. I mean, you can measure the effectiveness of some business strategies or even some psychological interventions, but
But with homeopathy, especially claims about working on a genetic level, yeah, it's understandable why people are skeptical.
so how do we, like, reconcile those different perspectives?
Uh-huh.
The scientific need for evidence and the actual experiences people are having.
That's a tough one. Maybe we need a whole other deep dive just to figure that out.
Maybe we do. But for now, I think the best we can do is, just acknowledge that it's complex.
Yeah.
And stay curious and keep exploring.
I like that. Stay curious and explore. After all, that's what we're doing here, right?
Exactly. But before we get too lost in the weeds, I think it's important to step back and look at the bigger picture of what Dr. Ejaz is doing.
Good idea. There's still a lot to unpack here.
I'm ready when you are. Okay, so we spent a lot of time with Dr. Ejaz now. His skills, his approach, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, and we keep coming back to this question, right? Like, does it work? Does any of it actually lead to, real results?
Yeah, exactly. We've seen those patient testimonials, but we haven't really dug into whether there's solid evidence for his methods.
And that's tricky because he's using a blend of approaches. I mean, some things are easier to measure, like the psychology stuff, the business strategies. You can see if those are effective.
But with the homeopathy, especially when he talks about working on a genetic level, I get why there's skepticism.
Totally. We should always be critical and look for evidence. But at the same time, science doesn't have all the answers yet.
That's true. Like, there could be things that work, even if we don't know exactly why they work.
Exactly. And that's where personal experience comes in. We can't just ignore people saying, hey, this helped me, even if we don't have a scientific explanation yet.
So how do we balance that? The need for evidence and the reality that people have these experiences?
Honestly, I don't know if there's a simple answer. Maybe it's about staying curious and open to the possibility that, there's more to health and healing than we currently realize.
I like that. Stay curious. But I keep thinking, what about the patients themselves? What are their stories?
That's such a great point. And unfortunately, we can only get so much from the materials we have. We need to hear from them directly to really understand what it's like to work with Dr. Ejaz.
Exactly. Like, what brought them to him in the first place? What were their expectations? Did they get what they were hoping for?
Those are the questions we need to ask.
So it sounds like our deep dive is just the first step. To really get the full picture, we need to go beyond these brochures and websites, right?
I think so. And you know what? Our listeners can do that too.
What do you mean?
Well, Dr. Ejaz has a website, clinics, he's even on social media. There are ways to learn more, maybe even connect with people who've experienced his work firsthand.
Oh, interesting. So we're encouraging everyone to keep digging, keep exploring.
Exactly. And as always, approach it all with a critical but open mind. Ask questions, look for evidence, and trust your gut.
That's great advice. Ultimately, it's about each of us taking charge of our own health journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being informed, making the choices that feel right for us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Dr. Ahmed Ejaz.
What a ride.
It has been fascinating. Hopefully you all have a better sense of his approach, his philosophy, this idea of empowering people to reach their full potential.
And hey, maybe this is just the beginning of your own exploration. Keep asking those questions, keep learning, keep driving deep,